Canada entered the Second World War with a modest air force, but what followed was one of the biggest aviation expansions the country had ever seen. From rugged bush planes pressed into military service to advanced fighters built under license, Canadian aircraft filled the skies across Europe, the Atlantic, and the Pacific. This is the complete story of every aircraft Canada flew in World War II. Canada's transformation started with an impossible challenge. When Britain declared war in September 1939, Canada faced a brutal reality. The Royal Canadian Air Force owned exactly 275 aircraft. Most were obsolete. Some couldn't even fight. Yet within 6 years, Canada would build over 16,000 aircraft and train more than 130,000 aircrew. Here's how they did it. De Havilland Tiger Moth, the foundation of everything. This open cockpit biplane taught thousands of young men how to fly. Simple, forgiving, and reliable, the Tiger Moth handled student mistakes without killing them. Canada used hundreds for basic training under the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. Avro Tudor, another basic trainer biplane. Older than the Tiger Moth, but still useful for early instruction. It helped fill the massive demand when training schools opened across Canada practically overnight. North American Harvard, the advanced trainer that separated students from pilots. Powered by a 600 horsepower Pratt & Whitney radial engine, the Harvard mimicked combat aircraft handling. It was loud, demanding, and unforgiving of sloppy flying. But if you could master the Harvard, you could fly anything. Canada built hundreds under license at WWII Aviation in Montreal. Fairchild Cornell, Canada's primary trainer. Built by Fleet Aircraft at Fort Erie, Ontario, the Cornell filled the gap between basic and advanced training. Over 1,500 rolled off Canadian production lines. They were reliable, economical, and exactly what the training plan needed. Boeing Stearman Cadet, an American-designed biplane trainer used extensively by Canadian schools. Rugged and dependable, it trained thousands of pilots who would go on to fly bombers and fighters over Europe. Avro Anson, the multi-engine trainer. Nicknamed Faithful Annie, the Anson taught bomber crew coordination, navigation, and instrument flying. Canada produced thousands of Ansons, most built in Britain and some in Canada, making it one of the most common training aircraft in RCAF service. After the war, many continued flying as transports and coastal patrol aircraft. Then came the operational aircraft Canada desperately needed, Hawker Hurricane, Canada's first modern fighter. When war began, Canada had exactly 19 Hurricanes, all imported from Britain. Canadian Car and Foundry in Fort William, Ontario quickly began building them under license. The Hurricane wasn't glamorous compared to the Spitfire, but it was tough, reliable, and easier to build. It bore the brunt of early air combat, shooting down more enemy aircraft during the Battle of Britain than all other defenses combined. Supermarine Spitfire, the legend. While Canada didn't build Spitfires, Canadian pilots flew them extensively with RAF and RCAF squadrons. The Spitfire represented the pinnacle of fighter design, elegant, fast, and deadly. Multiple Canadian squadrons operated Spitfires throughout the European theater, and some continued in RCAF service after the war. Curtiss P-40 Warhawk, also called the Kitty Hawk. Rugged and versatile, the P-40 excelled at low-altitude ground attack missions. RCAF squadrons flew them in North Africa and the Mediterranean, where their toughness proved invaluable. The distinctive shark mouth paint scheme made them instantly recognizable. North American P-51 Mustang, the long-range escort fighter that changed everything. With drop tanks, Mustangs could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. RCAF pilots flew Mustangs with both Canadian and RAF squadrons, dominating the skies over Germany in the war's final year. If you're still fascinated by Canada's incredible wartime transformation, subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from history. Now let's talk about the bombers Canada built and flew. Bristol Bolingbroke, Canada's coastal patrol bomber. Built by Fairchild Aircraft in Longueuil, Quebec, the Bolingbroke was a Canadian-modified version of the Bristol Blenheim. Multiple RCAF squadrons flew them on anti-submarine patrols off both Canadian coasts. They weren't glamorous, but they protected convoys from U-boat attacks. Handley Page Hampton, a medium bomber built under license in Canada. Canadian Associated Aircraft formed specifically to produce Hamptons in Toronto. Most were shipped to Britain, while a portion from Sydney, British Columbia for coastal and bombing training. The Hampton's narrow fuselage earned it the nickname Flying Suitcase, but it carried a respectable bomb load. De Havilland Mosquito, the wooden wonder. Here's where Canadian manufacturing ingenuity shined. De Havilland, Canada and Downsview, Ontario received a contract for 1,100 Mosquitoes. But here's the brilliant part. They coordinated 57 different companies to build components. General Motors built major fuselage components. Massey Harris built wings. Boeing Canada produced tailplanes. The Canadian Powerboat Company manufactured flaps. Even the Cockshut Plow Company contributed. A company that made plows was suddenly building fighter bomber parts. Over 1,032 Canadian-built Mosquitoes flew during the war. The Mosquito was revolutionary. Built almost entirely of wood because aluminum was scarce, it relied on speed instead of armor or defensive guns. At over 400 miles per hour, it was one of the fastest aircraft in the world. It could outrun most enemy fighters. 6 Canadian squadrons flew Mosquitoes on everything from photo, reconnaissance, to night fighting to V-1 flying bomb interception. Squadron 418 scored dozens of victories against V-1s, becoming one of the top Canadian Mosquito units in this role. Avro Lancaster, Canada's greatest contribution to strategic bombing. Victory Aircraft Limited in Malton, Ontario was created specifically to build Lancasters. Building only one Lancaster required 500,000 manufacturing operations involving 55,000 individual parts. Yet by 1944, Victory Aircraft reached peak efficiency, completing new Lancasters at a rapid pace and consistently meeting Bomber Command's demands. 430 Canadian-built Lancaster Mark 10s rolled off the line. These weren't only assembled in Canada, they were built better than British Lancasters. When the first Canadian Lancaster, called Ruhr Express, arrived in England, British inspectors said it was the best-equipped aircraft they'd ever received from North America. Canadian Lancasters went directly to No. 6 Group, the RCAF component of Bomber Command, making it an all-Canadian contribution. One Canadian Lancaster, KB-732, completed 83 operations, more than any other Canadian-built Lancaster. Next up is the specialized aircraft that solved unique problems. Nordwing Norseman, the only completely Canadian-designed aircraft of the war. Built in Montreal, the Norseman was a rugged bush plane, designed for Canada's harsh conditions. Over 900 were produced, serving not only with the RCAF, but also the United States Army Air Forces. After the war, Norseman continued flying in Canada's north for decades. Consolidated Canso, the Canadian designation for the PBY Catalina flying boat. Canadian Vickers in Montreal built Cansos for anti-submarine warfare. These flying boats and amphibians could operate from water or land, depending on the specific Canso variant in service. They spotted submarines, rescued downed aircrews, and conducted long-range maritime reconnaissance. Douglas Dakota, the military version of the DC-3 transport. While not built in Canada, Dakotas served extensively with the RCAF. They hauled supplies, dropped paratroopers, and evacuated wounded. After D-Day, RCAF Dakotas flew constantly between Britain and newly liberated Europe. Fairey Swordfish, the antiquated biplane torpedo bomber that somehow remained effective throughout the war. Canadian crewed units operated Swordfish on anti-submarine patrols from Royal Navy escort carriers. Despite looking like a relic from World War I, Swordfishes attacked the German battleship Bismarck and sank more tonnage than any other Allied aircraft. Then came the fighters that defended Canadian skies at home, Curtiss Helldiver, the carrier-based dive bomber. Remarkably, Canada became a major producer of Helldivers, with Canadian Car and Foundry and Fairchild Aircraft building 1,134 of them. Most went to the United States Navy, showcasing how Canadian manufacturing supported the entire Allied war effort. Westland Lysander, built by National Steel Car in Malton, Ontario. The Lysander was an Army cooperation aircraft designed to work with ground forces. Many towed targets at bombing and gunnery schools across Canada, training air crews to shoot accurately. Some performed special operations in Europe, landing secretly in occupied France to deliver and extract resistance fighters. Lockheed Hudson, a twin-engine maritime patrol bomber. RCAF Hudsons flew anti-submarine patrols over the Atlantic, protecting convoys bringing supplies to Britain. They spotted U-boats, called in warships, and sometimes attacked submarines directly. Lockheed Ventura, a light bomber and patrol aircraft. RCAF squadrons operated Venturas on anti-shipping strikes and reconnaissance missions. They were fast and well-armed, but faced heavy losses against German defenses. Bristol Beaufighter, a heavy fighter based on the Beaufort torpedo bomber. Twin-engine, heavily armed, the Beaufighter excelled at night fighting and ground attack. Canadian manned RAF and RCAF squadrons flew them on anti-shipping strikes, attacking German convoys along the European coast. Vickers Wellington, a medium bomber with revolutionary geodetic construction. The Wellington's basket-weave airframe could absorb tremendous damage and keep flying. RCAF squadrons operated Wellingtons on bombing raids over Germany before transitioning to heavier four-engine bombers. Now, let's talk about the aircraft Canada used but didn't build: Supermarine Seafire, the naval version of the Spitfire. Canadian pilots flew Seafires from Royal Navy carriers in the Pacific Theater, though Canada never built them domestically. Hawker Typhoon, a ground attack fighter bomber. Typhoons armed with rockets devastated German armor after D-Day. While Canadian pilots flew them, all production remained in Britain. Hawker Tempest, an improved Typhoon designed as a high-speed interceptor. Tempests caught and destroyed German V-1 flying bombs over England. Canadian pilots flew them in the war's final months. De Havilland Vampire, Britain's first operational jet fighter. The Vampire arrived too late for combat but became Canada's first jet fighter post-war, with 6 squadrons equipped by 1948. Gloucester Meteor, the only Allied jet to see combat. Meteors intercepted V-1 flying bombs and flew ground attack missions in 1945. Canada acquired Meteors after the war for evaluation. Short Sunderland, a massive 4-engine flying boat. Canadian crewed RAF squadrons operated Sunderlands on long-range maritime patrol over the Atlantic, hunting submarines for hours at a time. Consolidated Liberator, the B-24 heavy bomber. RCAF squadrons flew Liberators primarily on long-range anti-submarine patrols and ferry missions. The Liberator had longer range than the Lancaster, making it ideal for Pacific operations. Boeing B-17, Flying Fortress, the iconic American heavy bomber. While primarily an American aircraft, Canadian crews flew B-17s on loan within RAF units for special missions. Grumman Avenger, the carrier-based torpedo bomber that replaced the obsolete Devastator. Canadian naval aviation units flew Avengers from escort carriers hunting submarines, moving on to the remarkable achievement nobody expected. When Britain needed somewhere safe to train pilots, they turned to Canada. The British Commonwealth Air Training Plan transformed Canada into the Aerodrome of Democracy. At its peak, 231 training facilities operated across Canada. Over 50,000 pilots graduated, along with navigators, bombardiers, wireless operators, and air gunners. Roughly half were Canadian, the rest from Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and other allied nations. This training program required enormous aircraft production. 2/3 of Canada's 16,418 aircraft were trainers. The other third were operational types that fought on every front. Canadian factory space expanded from 500,000 square feet before the war to 14 million square feet at peak production. Nearly 116,000 workers, including 30,000 women, built these aircraft. Canada's aviation industry grew from practically nothing to the nation's 4th largest industry. The human cost was staggering. Of Canada's 44,000 military deaths in World War II, 17,397 were RCAF personnel. That's nearly 40% of casualties, despite the Air Force representing less than 19% of Canadian forces. Every training flight carried risk. Every bombing mission was a gamble with death, yet they kept flying. From the simple Tiger Moth that taught beginners to the mighty Lancaster that bombed Berlin, from the wooden Mosquito that defied conventional design to the Norseman that conquered Canada's wilderness, these aircraft represent an impossible achievement. A nation with minimal aviation industry in 1939 built and operated an air force that became the fourth largest in the world by 1945. Canadian ingenuity didn't only build aircraft, it coordinated entire industries. Plow companies made bomber parts, elevator manufacturers contributed to fighters. The impossible became routine. And in doing so, Canada helped win the war in the air. If this story of Canada's incredible contribution amazed you, hit that like button and tell us in the comments which aircraft surprised you most.